It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and I was lying on my parents' couch reading yet another library book on real estate investing. It was a pattern of talking about it and reading about it and researching, but not actually moving on investing in real estate. And you know why? I was freaking scared. Debt, tenants, leases, contractors, taxes, it all seemed so complicated. And on this day, my mother walked up to me and said, "Stop reading about it and start doing it." My real estate investment passion became a reality that year, and actually, it's not that complicated after all. And if you're a beginner real estate investor, this is the video for you. Listen, I'm an average person from a working class background living an average happy life, and I made over $1.44 million from a portion of a very small real estate portfolio. I'm not a financial planner and I'm not giving financial advice. I cannot promise you you'll make $1 million in real estate, as you need to make your own financial decisions. But if I can do it following my simple steps I created, I believe you can do it. It is true, it's not a get rich quick process, but it's not a 50-year process either. Today we're going to explore my story and the trials and tribulations that I came across. Real estate transformed my life, and I believe it can transform your life too. So let's delve into it. Now, I went to school for several different careers, and I worked in 3 different careers. So I was a registered nurse, I went into human resources, then I went into teaching, and then I went back to human resources. I've always had a job, and I rented since my late teens when I started university. It seemed money never went that far, and I've learned that changing careers can really impact your cash flow and ability to build wealth. I used to watch this A&E TV show called American Castles on Saturday mornings after my work week, and I'd read finance books. My takeaway from that was that many of those people got rich owning real estate. I was renting at the time, making someone else rich. I knew I had to find a better way than just my job to protect myself and build wealth. I wanted a house, but I was scared. I was a single female in my early 30s, and I had changed careers again, now working for a not-for-profit agency and literally making no money. I had to take the first job that came up after leaving teaching. I knew if I didn't take my financial situation more seriously, I would have nothing for retirement, as I had no pension at most of my other jobs. And I kept changing careers, so then I wasn't exactly taking a pension with me. I, like many of you, was completely dependent on my job and my landlord. So then the work began, researching and buying real estate. So I had to change some lifestyle things like no frivolous spending, no spending on takeout, clothes, or other things that I really didn't need to make sure that I could meet my financial goals. I read every library book on real estate that my public library owned. I bought real estate books, but no one was really doing the way that I wanted to do it with single family homes. Now, I know there's other books out there, but I didn't see them at the time. I thought buying single family homes was a safer way to invest, as they're easier to flip if things go wrong. Tenants will treat the house as if it's their own home, and I had no mentors, so these real estate books became my mentor and mastermind group. So step one, I had to start with buying my own first home. I'd like to thank my neighbor and my landlord at my apartment building, as they were instrumental also in giving the push for my millionaire journey. My neighbor was throwing parties all the time during the week and the weekends until the early morning hours with insanely loud music. Frivolous noise complaints many times when I was not home were being made on me because he was mad at me, writing me letters, throwing a slipper at me for hanging pictures on the wall early in the morning, of course, after he had been drinking the night before. You get the picture. The landlord then advised that he'd be sending both of us letters, even though the date that the neighbor indicated I was home making noise, I wasn't actually home. And at that moment, I realized that that landlord had all of the control and I had absolutely none. 9 years of being a great tenant made no difference. I've seen financial experts say you don't need a house to get rich. It's true, you can build wealth by renting, but I can tell you when you rent, you have no control over your living situation. At a landlord's whim, you might need to find a place to live. I prefer to own. I purchased my first single-family home down the street from the apartment within the same year that all of that happened. On the outside, it looked like it was falling apart as it needed a little cosmetic work on outside, but when the movers came inside, their comment was, "Wow," because inside was nice. It had an outdated kitchen, but it had good structure, and I used all borrowed money to put the down payment down. In Canada, we have a first-time house buyer program, and I do have a video on that program as well if you're interested in looking at it. That program, you can borrow the money from your RRSP, which is a registered retirement savings plan, to put towards your down payment for your first house. I put a down payment of 15% of my own money, basically, and then I had to pay that back, but you can watch that other video. As for the negotiation, it was a struggle at first. I was using a realtor at the time who was not the realtor selling the place. Eventually, they became the realtor that was selling the place, but they weren't too happy with the lowball offers I was putting in on this particular property. And I believe my realtor called them insulting. I lost the house to another bidder, and then it failed at inspection, so I put in another offer. We kept going back and forth with no result until the owner called me. Let's call them Bob. And they called me directly after the last time it failed. I was sitting reading a real estate investment book at the time from the library. Remember, there were opportunities you don't expect that we have to take and we have to run with it. I had just finished reading a page in the book on the negotiation. We talked about a lot of things and just settled on a price, which was the insulting price I originally put in. And I said to Bob at the end of the negotiation, when we agreed on that price, of course, everything that we talked about in the beginning will still apply, which included a new washer and dryer and fixing of the chimney with the repointing of the brick and the discounted price. After a pause, it was confirmed. We agreed to have the realtor write it up the next day. I got 20% off the list price with all the extras included. I will forever be grateful to Bob. I did mostly cosmetic things. I painted, added some plants in the garden, and my dad rebuilt the porch, plus put some copper piping in. Thanks, Dad. 3 years later, I sold that house to buy a smaller single-family house closer to my family in the same city. I negotiated directly with the owner again. Seems like a pattern of tense moments, I know. It was for this house as well, apparently. The owner, we're going to call him Barney, that's not his real name, was so mad at me with my lowball offers, he slammed the phone down on me. And I just thought, that's done. We're just not going to be able to get this house. It was a great house because it was around the corner from my parents, so that would have been really helpful. 2 weeks later, he called me back to tell me he would accept the offer. I advised him that offer was no longer on the table, but happy to talk about a new lower price. Barney and I agreed to 15% below asking. And are you starting to see the theme here? Buy small to medium-sized properties in nice areas and try to get them below market value if you can. My plan was to use the additional proceeds from my first house to pay off the second house. I walked away with $100,000 in appreciation, and in Canada, you don't have to pay tax on money you get from the sale of your principal residence, with some exceptions. Now armed with funds, I put all that money down on the second house. I know I can hear you through the screen saying, buy some more properties instead. And that just wasn't my strategy at the time, as I didn't want to over leverage, meaning, to have too high a debt load. I bought the last house during the crash in 2008, so it was real fear to have that kind of debt sitting on you in terms of the housing market. 2 years later, putting lump sums down from saving and from my salary, I paid off the rest of the debt on that house. 5 years to pay for my first house. Pretty good. It was no mansion, I understand, but I'll tell you that it was the smartest decision I ever made, in my opinion. It was an okay single-family home in a nice neighborhood. That house became my bank for all of the other properties that I ended up buying. I immediately put a HELOC on the house, which is a home equity line of credit, and I used these funds to buy several properties. Now, when I used this money to put that down payment down on the new houses, all the mortgage debt was interest deductible because I was using that to invest in other things. And in Canada, you can do that. Debt can really weigh you down, so having a house completely paid for took some of that strain off of me. It gave me the confidence that I could be a real estate investor. Some investors will tell you to take on more and more debt to leverage. And I do believe in leveraging debt to create financial freedom, but like the author of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel, says, you have to find the path that makes the most sense to you. I have a very low tolerance for debt, so there's only so much I'm willing to take on. At one point in my path, I remember lying in bed and I owed $1.2 million in debt. It was all good debt in the sense that it was producing an income through rental funds, but it was just hanging there, $1.2 million. Plus I was single, one paycheck, having to do all of this work in between my 9 to 5, 5 day a week full-time job. So that had to be done outside of that on evenings and weekends. And exactly like you, juggling all that life throws at us. My strategy for investment properties was to buy close to where I lived in a nice working class neighborhood, not a high-end neighborhood. You can keep a close eye on the properties regularly as you go about your business in your neighborhood, like shopping, going to work, etc. That nice neighborhood had people that took pride in their homes. They had pride of ownership. They were not huge homes or huge lots, but they were safe, close to schools and bus lines, grocery stores, and highways. So that year, I bought two single-family homes, which were investment properties, within months of each other. They were 5 blocks from my own house. I negotiated the first investment property in the driveway of the house with the realtor selling the property. So in other words, I went with the realtor that was going to double in the commission. Another strategy to use is engaging the realtor that is selling the house so that they can double in that commission. There is great incentive to get the deal done if they're getting the buyer and the seller commission. But I did it during an open house, so trying to get the realtor away from other people there during the showing was tough. She was on the phone and I had to wait, and I also had to stare down one potential buyer, and he quickly left saying he'd call her. I made a lowball offer verbally, and the owner was waiting in her car in the driveway. Now that one wasn't accepted, but we agreed on a slight price reduction in the sale price in the end of the day, but it was all done in that driveway. That's how we came to the terms within a half an hour. In all of these examples, I did my homework prior to seeing the house. I got a 5% reduction off the list price for this house, but it was the best house as it cash flowed well after all expenses, with a few $100s per month after that. And the taxes were really low in comparison to most of my other houses. For the second rental, again, I used the realtor selling the house and got approximately 10% off the list price for that house. The biggest struggle there was the bank, as they charged a $1,300 fee to borrow, as it was a non-standard size. It was less than 800 square feet. It was a small little wartime house. And we negotiated again, and I had the realtor redo the sales agreement, and both the owner and I shared in the cost of that fee. I know one of your questions might be, did I reno or rehab? And the truth is, I did almost nothing to them on the front end. I put them up for rent immediately the day they closed, to be honest. And there's a myth that you cannot rent a place and get a decent rent if it's not completely renovated, and that's just not true. These houses had retro kitchens, old carpets, and small backyards. The rent for both covered all expenses and a reserve for maintenance. Sometimes the tenants fixed issues themselves. Sometimes I had to get a contractor. The tenants dealt with the lawn and the snow removal. When you rent a single-family home, the tenants are happy to take on some of these tasks as they want to live in a home. And it's their home, and they want to take care of it as such. The two rentals both got rented immediately, as I said before, by me with no cost to advertising, as I posted them on free online forums. I vetted the tenants, and another part of my strategy is to do all of those things myself. I'm the property manager. I want to make sure that I vetted who's going to be living in my house, and I want people that will take pride in the home and that they will live in as if it is their own home. I had the same tenants for years. It's basically the same tenants that first rented until we sold the place. I probably spent a half hour a week on average in total for these houses during the period they were rented. For the next 8 years, I went on to buy, hold, and sell 5 other houses. So in total, I had 10 houses along the journey. The journey has certainly been interesting, and I put in lots of offers along the way that did not work out at all, and people were sometimes angry. I love real estate, and I even took the real estate agent certification program here where I live after I bought my first house, as I thought that might be my next career. And that was an expensive endeavor, thousands of dollars for that, and I never did work as a realtor. I found investing far more fun. Plus, I love my job, and I really didn't want to leave it, and there's synergy in real estate and human resources. For example, negotiations, recruiting tenants, which includes screening applications, interviewing, confirming incomes, putting policies and systems in place, to name a few. So where did the 1.44 million come from? A few years ago, I sold 3 houses within less than 10 months period, and I became a millionaire. I sold my single-family home that was my bank and the first 2 single-family homes that I had purchased as rentals. I became a millionaire. Did I say that already? I became a millionaire. a tiny, small portfolio that had powerful results. They were still outdated, and I improved them both by adding 2 new furnaces when I went to go sell them. I had expenses such as mortgages to pay off. I had some maintenance costs, realtor costs, fees, taxes, which brought the total down to about $1 million. In the end, I had my retirement money to invest within 8 years of my first rental property, and someone else was paying for those investments during that entire time. I harvested the windfall, which is a term that Chad Carson defines as selling some of your portfolio to pay off other homes within the portfolio, and that's just what I did. It was my time to harvest to prepare for retirement. Your harvest time might be completely different. You might not sell them at all. I still own a few houses with tenants and still property manage all of it. Now I have a husband who is on this journey as well, and we are always looking for good real estate opportunities. So let's do a quick recap of my strategy. Remember, this is my strategy. You might do something differently. Buy your own home first and use that asset to be your bank for investment properties if you can, if it's legal and where you live. Buy single family homes in nice neighborhoods where the internal structures are in good working order. And what I mean by that is that the plumbing, septic, electrical are all to code and are in working order. Outdated look is just fine. Buy below market price if you can through negotiations. Use the realtor selling the house as there's an incentive to come to a deal where you can, because they're going to be getting the commission for both buy and sell. Rent them as is, and if you must do some work, ensure it's only cosmetic touch-ups where possible on the front end when you have the least appreciation in the property. Do not be too attached and sell houses when there is worthwhile appreciation, harvesting those gains for other things, which is different for every person. What can you take away from this story? You can do this too. Again, I'm not giving financial advice. You have to make your own financial decisions, but if I can do it, you can too. I started by buying my own single family home. A few years later, I started buying rental properties, and I didn't rehab. I purchased, I rented, and I repeated. Other people's money paid for a lot of this process. So basically in 8 years, I became a millionaire from 3 rental properties. I was scared at first, just like I know many of you are right now. And believe me, having that much debt can cause some sleepless nights, to be sure, but it's the best decision I ever made. Thank you for watching this video and sharing in my journey. I hope you'll consider taking a chance in investing in real estate. I'll see you in the next video. Starting again. But happy to talk to and use the realtor selling the house as there is an incentive to come. It's my story and it's terrible. I'm having such trouble.